Good morning. Welcome back. First of all, with the midterm, we pretty much wrapped up the first half of the session. We covered everything good? All right. We covered and practiced and reviewed all the material pertaining to equilibrium, the policies, and the welfare effects or the well-being effects of those policies on consumers, producers, government, total surplus, and so on, right? Now, we are now entering the topic, or re-entering the topic we introduced before I opened the midterm for you, and that was the topic of the firm behavior, right? We're talking about the behavior of firms. What exactly does it mean? What does it mean to talk about behavior of the firms, guys? If you have any recollection of what we talked about, the pictures we drew.
Is it elasticity and stuff like that?
Actually, past elasticity. Yes?
Diminishing marginal product?
Absolutely. We talked about the diminishing marginal product, the law of diminishing marginal product. Do you remember why we talked about that? And again, yeah, I'll drag you through all those boring snakes today, and we'll take a look at the same ideas. It's just before we do that, before I drag you through roughly an hour of boring stuff, you better be motivated to survive that. Why? Why is it important? How does it fit the entire narrative? First of all, you know that this entire course is about efficiency, right? Efficiency of the economy. In other words, excuse me, in a sense, this course follows up on the course in macro that you've taken before. You remember 2013 macro, where you learned about what the economy is, right? It's that system that transforms resources into goods and services, right? And then we've spent the rest of the semester in 2013 talking about the health of the economy. When the economy is healthy and production of goods and services is growing, when the economy is sick and the production of goods and services is falling, and how to make it healthy again, right? Basically, we talked about the business cycle. We talked about what drives business cycle. We talked about what can be done about smoothing out the business cycle to make the recessions shorter and less severe. The policies, right? We talked about all that. And all along, basically, we were talking about the American economy. Our American economy that sometimes is very healthy, doing fine. Sometimes it goes through those sad periods of recessions and bad economic times. The curious thing about the American economy is that even at its worst, it's pretty much the best economy on earth. It's just a remarkably good economy with its ups and downs, but overall it is just a miraculously, fabulously good economy. How is that possible? And the answer is that inherent, fundamental, all-important attribute our economy has, and that is efficiency, right? Our economy tends to produce goods and services more efficiently than most other economies on earth. And so, if we ask what makes our economy efficient, how to preserve efficiency of our economy, and how to make our economy even more efficient into the future, we are taking this second course, this 2023 micro. Why? Because in the course of macro, as we learned about the health of the economy, excuse me, we did not learn what makes our economy efficient. I'm just trying how to make this more intuitive. It's like, imagine that some of us are athletes, superb runners, and some of us are sluggish runners, right? And imagine we're talking about the best runner in class, a superb athlete. The superb athlete sometimes is also sick. right? Sometimes superb athlete gets a cold, catches a flu or something. Guys, is there any doubt that the top athlete in this class could easily outrun me, even with a flu? Easily. There you go. That's what I'm talking about, right? So we were basically talking in 2013 about the top athlete, top runner, that sometimes is healthy, sometimes it's sick, but it's still the top runner. By studying that health and possibly sometimes a flu doesn't explain what makes that person top runner. I'm just simply accepting that as an assumption. Let's suppose this is the best runner. Whereas this class, 2023, really is about what makes someone a top runner. And the answer is efficiency. That's what makes you the top runner in the economic world, right? And if you want to find out the secret, what makes someone a top athlete, studying flu is not going to answer that. That makes sense? You can study flu all you want, and you are not going to explain why somebody can run a marathon. You and I get flu once in a while. Marathon runners get flu once in a while. Studying flu is not going to explain how come someone is top athlete. And so now we're studying what makes someone top athlete. What makes an economy efficient. And we find out you can't find it in this realm of macroeconomics that we've studied. You have to take a look at microeconomics. Why? Because this secret to efficiency is actually hidden at the cellular level of that economy, at the level of individual markets, right? So that's what we've studied for the first half of the semester. Demand, supply, price, quantity, basically a market for a single good. The basic building block of the economy. And we found the properties of equilibrium. And we found the well-being or welfare properties of equilibrium, consumer surplus, producer surplus, total surplus. We imposed policies, we distorted equilibrium, we found out what happened to surpluses. We studied all that. How far did we get in our study of efficiency? Well, we made a moderate progress. This helped us find a pattern through all those policies you guys have seen. You have seen one thing happening every single time. I introduced the market, we found the equilibrium, we found total surplus, then we introduced the policy. We studied the effect on consumer surplus, producer surplus, government revenue, and we found total surplus. What happened every single time as we imposed the policy on the market? What happened to total surplus? Decreased every single time. What did that tell us? What did that tell us about what we're interested about most? It told us that market in equilibrium is efficient. Every distortion of equilibrium, using taxes, subsidies, ceilings, floors, whatever, reduces efficiency, causes inefficiency of the market, right? That deadweight loss is the measure of inefficiency, just how much efficiency is lost due to the policy. That's what we found out. So, we found out that in equilibrium, market tends to be efficient. Does that explain what makes the market efficient in equilibrium? No. We still haven't found that one out. So that's basically what we're about to do with the remaining courses, or remaining classes. What do we have, 3 weeks left or something like that, including this? So we're going to dig deeper and ask what makes equilibrium efficient and what are the conditions for equilibrium to be efficient. Okay? And to find the answer, we now realize it's not enough to look at the cellular level, to look at the cell, single cell of that economy, to look at the market equilibrium. What we have to do is we have to look even deeper. And in particular, we have to dig deeper and look deeper inside the properties of supply. But what is supply?
Guys, what is supply? behavior of firms, particularly.
Amount of goods and amount of a good or quantity of a good firms are willing and able to produce, right? In other words, we have to ask more in much greater detail. Why are firms choosing to produce this particular quantity of a good or service? In other words, supply tells you that at this price, firms are willing and able to produce this quantity. And the answer is why? Why that particular quantity? What is it about that quantity that firms prefer to any other quantity at that price?
Maximize profit.
Bingo. We will study the firm behavior. This is what we mean by firm behavior. Choice of quantity produced. That's what we mean by firm behavior. Okay? We will study this firm's behavior, or the firm's behavior, based on an assumption that firms are trying to maximize their profit. Pi, Greek pi, stands for profit, right? And firms choose a quantity produced, or a firm chooses quantity produced, lowercase q, in order to maximize the profit. Once again, what's the difference between capital Q and lowercase q? This is market output, all firms together. This is one firm's output. In other words, you see, we're looking even deeper. In 2013, we started with the whole economy. In 2023, we're looking at a single cell of the economy, and that is the market for milk, let's say, right? But even in a market for milk, which is one of millions of markets in this economy, even in that market for milk, there are a lot of producers, a lot of consumers, right? A lot of people interact there. So we are taking our analysis even deeper, and we're looking at the level of a single firm, okay? We're going to take a look at decisions made at the level of one single producer. And we'll see if we actually get someplace with our analysis of where efficiency comes from. That makes sense? Very good. Good morning. So that's the motivation. Now, let's see how far we got with the study of a single firm. First of all, we decided to study firm as a profit maximizers, right? In other words, a firm choosing output in order to maximize the profit. What is the profit, guys? How do you find firm's profit?
Revenue minus cost.
Absolutely. It's the total revenue minus total cost, right? Total revenue minus total cost. And if we really want to understand how firm picks that particular quantity to maximize profit, we really have to know everything about total cost and everything about total revenue, correct? And last time we talked about this, I told you we're going to start analyzing total cost first, right? We will start with analysis of total cost. Why? Why don't we start with total revenue? There's a good reason for it. Because once I drag you through the analysis of total cost, which, like I said, it's going to take us a little time, and it gets convoluted, confusing, and boring. But once we are done with that convoluted, confusing, and boring part, we will simplify it into a very simple, transparent, easy-to-use context that will give us a very simple, convenient way to introduce cost into our analysis of the firm behavior. And the nice thing is, once we have that very simple way to introduce total cost into the study of firm's behavior, we will use it in every single example for the rest of the session. Every single firm will have very similar looking or the same type of cost structure. how is that possible? Before we even tried, how is that possible? Why do you think cost of a pizza place might actually look similar to the cost of Ford Motor Corporation or Exxon? Do you think cost of running pizza place is the same as cost of running Exxon Corporation? No, cost of running pizza place runs into thousands a day, or several thousand, possibly tens of thousands a month, right? Whereas cost of running Exxon Corporation probably runs into billions every month. So the costs are certainly not on the same scale. So what could possibly these two very different businesses have in common in terms of their cost structure?
It's all based off like money, US dollar.
Units we will use definitely are dollars.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Okay.
But there's more to it. You're right.
Okay.
The more you make, the more you spend.
The more you make, the more you, for example, the more you produce, the higher the cost, right? In other words, is it true that to bake more pizza costs more dollars? In other words, as the quantity of pizza produced rises, it will cost you more dollars to bake it. Is that true?
No, at a certain point, I think it would stop, wouldn't it?
I don't
Once
know.
you
Tell
pay
me
for,
why.
once you pay for like all your bills for the day, say like you need 80 pizzas to cover all employees, hourly, electricity for the store to stay open. So after 80 pizzas, let's say you make let's say you make $2 for the first 80. After the first 80, you would make, let's say, $20 or $15 or something. You would start doubling because it's just straight profit right there. Using your dough, which costs, I don't know, next to nothing. Wouldn't you think?
Okay.
Phone-
First of all, no, I mean, you are elaborating on a sensible idea that we will definitely elaborate on even further down the road. Now this is simpler. This is really only about cost. Now, you said 80 pizzas. Let's say you're baking 80 pizza, beyond 80 pizzas. Yes, but beyond 80 pizzas, you are still using up, like you mentioned, dough, which may be, let's say, negligible, but you are definitely using up electricity because you still have to bake it. And also, beyond 80 pizza, you still have to pay your workers to actually do it.
No, but,
Now, is it possible, based on what you're saying, that the cost is not really growing linearly? In other words, sometimes it grows faster, sometimes slower or something like that. Is that possible? Because like you said, first the cost may be high because something that you have to pay now pops up, and then you can bake more pizzas and the cost doesn't quite grow that fast because the dough is relatively cheap or something like that, right? That's the idea you were elaborating. The bottom line is the cost really is increasing. And you're right, it may not be increasing nice and smooth. Definitely. But the fact is the cost is increasing. Is baking 160 pizzas going to cost you more than baking 80 pizzas? Yeah. I mean, maybe your workers will bake those extra 80 pizzas without asking for a higher wage. But you still are going to burn electricity, you still are going to use the dough and tomato paste and whatnot, right? Is it possible that the increase in cost is going to be relatively small? Sure. But is it going to be for free? Do you get that dough for free? No. So, yeah, the more pizza you bake, the higher the cost of baking, total cost of baking pizza. If you're running Exxon Corporation, you're digging for oil. If you double the amount of oil you're digging out of earth, is that going to cost you more? Definitely. So you see, certain fundamental properties of cost functions are going to be there for just about every firm. And it goes beyond that, guys. As we develop more and more insight into properties of cost, you will see that some of the most important fundamental defining properties of cost are actually very universal and apply to every firm. So once I drag you through this part, we have a common foundation for studying cost of every firm. Okay? which then allows us to turn our attention to total revenue. And it turns out that just as cost properties are pretty much the same for every company, properties of revenue are not. Properties of revenue can dramatically vary from industry to industry. And as properties of revenue vary from industry to industry, so does the behavior of firm. And we will explain how properties of revenue determine behavior of the firm and how then those properties of revenue affect efficiency. And that's how we find the sources of efficiency, the determinants of efficiency, why some firms are more efficient than others, and you will have this complex, complete idea about where efficiency comes from, what makes markets efficient, and what we need to do in the future to preserve the efficiency of the American economy. Okay? So that's the plan for the rest of this session. So, first the boring stuff, properties of cost. How far did we get? What did we do to find the properties of cost? Well, we first established that yes, total cost is increasing as we bake more pizza, as we produce more stuff, right? And then I asked you this curveball question where I asked you, well, is the cost rising linearly? Is this concave? I think concave, right? Convex or spaghetti-like? And we said, well, there's no way to tell, right? There's no easy way to tell or intuitive way to tell what the total cost looks like. We just know it's rising, but we don't know exactly how. So that's why we then started building deeper, more intuitive understanding. And we used a funky example of a firm moving pianos, right? What did we learn from that exercise? We decided to consider factors that drive total product, that is quantity of pianos we move, depending on number of workers, amount of labor we use, correct? And what did we find out, very intuitively? What the shape of the total product curve could be? Well, we derived something that looked like that. Do you remember? Very good. Why did it look like a snake?
Because over time it just got crowded with workers.
Over time, meaning as we add more and more workers, right? In other words, just to make sure, there is no time axis here. It's not like today, tomorrow, the day after, or something. But as we add more workers, things change. How do things change as you have more workers? Well, generally speaking, with more workers, you can get more done, right? You get more work done. And so this measures just how much more work you get done with more workers. And we found out that initially, as you add workers, the amount of work you get done may actually rise dramatically, right? It may be increasing at an increasing rate. Why would that be? Again, if you've ever moved something heavy, like a piano or furniture, how much fun is it moving furniture by yourself? It's not fun at all. Not only is it not fun, but you're really not going to get far unless you're moving little chairs or something. If you're moving large pieces of furniture, you really don't get much done at all, alone. If you have someone to do it with, if there's two of you, does that make a difference? It doesn't only make a difference, it makes a huge difference, right? Because two people can actually get a lot done. One person can pretty much get nothing done. So adding a worker can make enormous difference, right? Can increase total product dramatically. Can increase total product at an increasing rate. That's why we had this total product curve rising at an increasing rate in that picture, right? And as we add more workers, yeah, we sure do get more done. But ultimately, as we keep adding workers, what happens?
Overcrowded.
It gets kind of crowded around that piece of furniture, around that piano, right? And as it gets crowded, you add another worker. How much does another worker help?
Nothing.
Not a whole lot, right? And as you keep adding workers, each additional worker adds less and less, what did we call that addition, that contribution? Marginal product, right? Marginal product, we called it marginal product. So one worker barely gets anything done. Two workers get a lot more done, right? You can see the dramatic increase. Three workers get a lot more done. Four workers get some more done. And five workers really don't get much more done at all, right? In other words, no worker produces nothing, right? When you have no workers, you produce nothing. First worker contributes or adds this much to total product, right? Second worker adds this much to total product. The third worker adds this much to total product. Fourth worker adds that much. Fifth worker adds that much. That makes sense? So what's the pattern of these blue arrows? Those blue arrows initially get bigger, but eventually get smaller again. Well, those arrows are called marginal product. This is marginal product of the first worker, second worker, third worker, fourth worker, fifth worker. And we see that the marginal product initially may be increasing, but eventually must be decreasing. Why am I saying may be increasing, must be decreasing? Why don't I just say it must be first increasing and then it must be decreasing? When you're moving pianos or furniture, does the second worker help a lot? Absolutely. Can the third worker help even more? Possibly. Does that work? Does it work like that in every possible industry, in every possible economic activity? You add the second worker, and the second worker makes more difference than the first worker. Does it always work like that? Not necessarily. In other words, this pattern of increasing marginal product may or may not be present in any given firm. When you're moving furniture, you see. When you're operating dentist chairs and you add another dental hygienist to a dental chair, maybe there's going to be no increasing marginal product, right? In other words, this pattern here may or may not be present. How about once the marginal product starts decreasing? Does that have to happen? Does the marginal product eventually have to start decreasing? Well, ask yourself. If you keep adding workers around one and the same piano, is each additional worker always going to help more and more?
No.
When there's 20 of you around the piano, you add the 21st one. Does the piano suddenly lose all the weight and starts floating in the air or something? Yes or no?
No.
No. In fact, 21st worker probably not only doesn't really help, but gets in everybody else's way, right?
Plus it costs
So,
so much.
the bottom line is, as you add more and more workers, eventually it gets overcrowded, and marginal product must begin to decrease. Exactly. So, this pattern of increasing marginal product may or may not be there. It's optional, right? But this pattern of decreasing marginal product must be there. That is mandatory. Because every human activity, as you get in every human activity, as you add more and more workers, eventually it must get overcrowded, right? So what do we call this mandatory pattern of decreasing marginal product?
Diminishing.
We call it the law of diminishing marginal product, right? The law of diminishing marginal product. Right? So, here we have a fairly general shape of a total product curve. Total product curve. Again, remember, we're going through this analysis of total product in order to learn something about cost. How are we going to do it? How can you learn something about cost from a snake explaining how you move pianos? Well, we have to work with it. Do you remember what we did with total product once we explained all these properties and introduced the law of diminishing marginal product? We took the total product graph and what did we do with it? We flipped the axis, remember? We flipped the axis. Are we good on this part of the board?
Yes, sir.
Cool. We flip the axis. So if labor is on the horizontal axis there, let's have labor on the vertical axis here. Quantities on the vertical there, let's have it on horizontal here. And once you flip the axis, of course, you have to flip also the snake, right? So the snake is now snaking this way. That makes sense? Very good. But it's still the same graph. It's just flipped around the 45-degree line, basically. So how much do we know from this than we knew from that? Nothing more. We didn't add any information. So what to do with this to learn something we didn't know before?
You gotta put a total revenue.
Well, not quite yet. Good idea. You're thinking like 2.5 steps ahead of where we are, which is good. Let's suppose for a second that the only cost of moving pianos are the costs of paying these workers. And let's suppose you pay every worker $100, the wage for a day, okay? $100 wage for a day. You have 1 worker, 2 workers, 3 workers, 4 workers, 5 workers. If you want to move this many pianos, how much is it going to cost you? To move this many pianos, you have to hire 1 worker, and it's going to cost you
100.
$100. How much is it going to cost you if you want to move this many pianos? You have to hire 2 workers, and it's going to cost you $200, correct? How much is it going to cost you to move this many pianos? $300. This many pianos, $400. Boring enough? This many pianos, $500, right? In other words, The cost of moving pianos is found by multiplying the number of workers you have times the wage you pay them. Correct? That is your cost of moving pianos. That makes sense? Very good. So what did we just find out? If you're in business of moving pianos, what does the cost of moving pianos look like? First of all, is it increasing or decreasing? It is increasing. Is it increasing linearly? No. It's increasing first at a decreasing rate and then at an increasing rate. That makes sense? Is that an interesting answer? Okay guys, we started the discussion by asking, what are the properties of cost of producing something? And we said, well, the more you're producing, the higher the cost, right? And then I asked you, okay, does the cost of producing something rise linearly, concave, convex, or spaghetti-like? And we agreed you cannot tell, right? In other words, you don't know what the properties of the cost look like. Take a look here. Can we tell? Heck yeah. Now we have the answer. Not only we know that the cost rises, which we knew all along, but we know that it tends to rise first at a decreasing rate and then at an increasing rate. Not only we know what cost looks like, but we know why. Why does the cost have this first snaked portion where it's increasing at a decreasing rate? Well, which part of total product curve does this correspond to? This one, optional, right? In other words, this portion of the cost function may or may not be there, as long as you have these synergies when you add the second worker, third worker, right? Those synergies make total product look like this, which means they'll make cost function look like this. But we know, regardless of whether you have those synergies or you don't have those synergies from adding second, third worker, eventually it's going to get overcrowded, and what must kick in? The law of diminishing marginal product. Which part of cost function corresponds to this law of diminishing marginal product portion of your total product curve? This one. This here, this shape of the cost function reflects the law of diminishing marginal product. That makes sense? So now, we no longer have a question, what does the cost function look like? It looks like some kind of a snake. Now we understand that snake, in this example, has two bends. The first bend is optional. The second bend must be there because it's determined or it's dictated by the law of diminishing marginal product. Right? Very good. Now, if I remember correctly, we then went a step further and made our analysis even more realistic. First of all, here you have an example of a firm where as you move more and more pianos, your cost rises, right? Does every cost of running a business always rise with increased production?
No.
Can you give me an example of cost of running a business that does not change regardless of how much pizza you bake or don't bake? Well, if you decide to open a pizza place here on the corner, does it mean you're going to buy a building?
Right.
Really? Do all pizza places around here own the building where they operate? No? So how do you actually acquire the place?
Rent.
You lease it, right? You lease it, In other words, you become a tenant and you're paying a monthly
Fee or bill.
rent, right? Lease, rent. So let's say you lease a place for $1,000 a month. How does your rent change when you bake more pizza? It doesn't. How much does your rent change if you take a month vacation and you don't bake a single pizza? There you go. So you see there's all kinds of costs. There are some costs that rise as you bake more pizza. And there are other costs that don't change as you bake more pizza, right? Is this still legit? No longer?
No, sir.
Okay, let's do it on this side. What does then the pattern of your rent look like, and how it depends upon number of pizzas that you bake? Well, if your rent is, let's say, $1,000, your rent will be $1,000 whether you bake no pizza, 100 pizzas, or 1,000 pizzas, right?
Stay constant.
In other words, it is constant. Exactly. It's a constant function, horizontal line. So you see, running a business involves incurring costs that are rising and incurring costs that are not rising. What do we call these two different classes of costs? This cost we call the fixed cost. This cost we call, well, it's the cost that varies with the output of goods and services you're producing, so it's called the variable cost. Exactly. It's variable cost. So producing something involves incurring variable costs and fixed, or variable cost and fixed cost. Total cost is then,
Isn't that variable cost plus fixed?
it is the sum of your fixed and variable cost. Exactly. That means to have a graph of total cost, you have to add fixed cost and variable cost. How do you do that? Say it again. You add them together. What does a graph of these two graphs, or what does a sum of these two graphs look like?
The variable would start at the constant. and go on
Exactly, exactly. You can think of variable cost as a snake. And if you want to add a snake on top of a fixed cost, it's like you're putting a snake on top of a stand, right? So your fixed cost is the stand, and you place that snake of variable cost on top of it. Right? And that's your total cost. Now you will find on Blackboard the new homework assignments. And the homework assignment you will start with first involves some problems testing your knowledge or skills, practicing your skills with cost structure of the firm. So I will ask you to start taking a look at that homework. Again, it involves a lot of questions. Some of them may be more advanced that we haven't covered yet. So when you start taking a look at it, don't get spooked when you can't answer all the questions. Always focus on stuff that we've covered in class. Take a look at it, try and find the numbers. Those are, again, numerical examples. Okay? To find answers to numerical questions, you will need these fundamental definitions of costs, right? And as we go along, we will add more and more of them, and you will be able to answer all the numerical questions. And once you answer numerical questions, I will ask you to do what? Graph your numerical answers. And once you graph your numerical answers, guess what you're going to find out? You're going to find out your snakes, right? And all the other curves that we're about to derive. In other words, here I'm going to be doing it relatively very intuitively with pictures, a lot of pictures, not that much in terms of numbers. On the homework, I will ask you to do things numerically. And then you will basically numerically derive all the graphs that we introduce in class. Once you do that, you come to class, you ask questions, and what are we going to do together? Review it all together, right? And I'll work on those problems with you. Very good. So, now we have total cost curve. Guys, we have total cost. We did it. We actually made a little bit progress, right? Now that we have total cost, we know what it looks like. We can start tinkering with total revenue. And once we have total revenue and total cost, we can put them together and we can find profit, right? Is that something we've done a class or two classes ago? I have a vague recollection we may have made some progress, but I don't know how far we've gotten. So, let me now erase moving pianos. Okay? We will reclaim some of this real estate here. And move on to study the properties of total revenue. And we will just introduce the very, very simplest ideas. First of all, how do you find total revenue? Let's say you're baking pizza. You sell 50 pizzas at $10 each. What's your total revenue? You sell 50 pizzas at $10 each. What's your total revenue?
500.
Sit up?
500.
Correct. How did you find that?
50 times 10.
50 times 10. What is 50? The quantity of pizzas. And what is 10?
Price.
The price of each pizza, right? You multiply them and you find total revenue. Does that make sense? Very good. That's your total revenue. Now, let's see what a graph of total revenue would look like. Assuming you're baking pizza and you're selling every pizza for $10, okay? Let's say you bake no pizza and you sell no pizza. How much total revenue do you generate? Zero. That's easy. You bake one pizza. How much total revenue do you generate? $10. You bake two pizzas. How much total revenue do you generate?
20.
$20. You bake three pizzas. How much total revenue do you generate? 30. Do we really have to do any more? Are you sufficiently bored with the idea of total revenue? Okay. When I connect these points, what do I get? I get a straight upward sloping line, right? Total revenue. Are you impressed? My goodness, guys, now we know what total revenue looks like. Now we know what total cost looks like. Do you think it's legit to put these two graphs in one? Is it okay to combine total revenue and total cost in one graph? What tells you whether or not it's a legit thing to do? The axes, exactly. Does it have the same axes? Do both of these curves or lines or whatever live in the same set of axes? Yeah, there's a dollar axis, quantity axis, dollar axis, quantity axis. We can stick them both together. So let's do it. Let's put them together. Now to do that, let me alter this one just a little bit so it's easier to work with. I want to exaggerate the shapes. Okay, total cost. Again, it's the same kind of shape of snake, only a little bit exaggerated. Fixed cost, total cost is fixed cost plus variable cost. Now, let's add total revenue. Okay, now we have a total revenue. So, we have total revenue and total cost in one picture. What is the firm trying to do? The firm is trying to produce the quantity of the good that will maximize the profit. So let me ask you, is the firm going to make the maximum profit possible by baking quantity Q1 pizzas?
No.
Correct. How do you know? What would the profit be if they bake Q1 pizzas?
0.
It would be 0. Correct. How do you know? Because that's where they intersect, which means at Q1, total revenue is equal to total cost. When your total revenue and total cost is the same, you're making 0 profit, correct? Very good. What would you recommend this business? Would you recommend this business to produce more than Q1 or less than Q1 if they want to make more than 0 profit? They should bake more, right? You tell them, bake more. And I'm running this business, I'm listening to you because you're smart. You're taking econ, you know all about making money, right? So I bake more. I baked Q2 pizzas. How am I doing? Wow, guys. I did exactly what you told me. I'm baking more than Q1 and I'm still making 0 profit. What's wrong?
Advertising them.
Great one. That's not the problem here. The problem is Q2, yes, it is more than Q1, but it ain't the quantity to produce, right? Do you think I should perhaps produce even more than Q2? Why not, by the way? What would happen if I produce more than Q2? You told me produce more than Q1, maybe Q2 is not enough. Maybe I should produce more. Why not?
You spend more than you make.
Because at any quantity above Q2, my total cost would exceed total revenue, and I would in fact be making negative profit. I would be generating loss, right? So that's not a way to make profit. So should I produce, what should I produce? More than Q2 or less than Q2? Less than Q2, definitely less than Q2, right? In other words, if I actually want to make profit, and in fact, if I want to make maximum profit possible, I have to produce somewhere between Q1 and Q2, correct? Now, you are feeling intuitively it should be somewhere
Middle.
in the middle, right? What does it mean middle? Literally middle like the average of Q1 and Q2? Straight up in the middle?
No. I'm trying.
I don't know if that's the quantity. In other words, how am I going to find the quantity at which the profit is maximized? So here, I have to provide you with some intuition, some intuitive help. Again, we're going to get there in stages using extremely simple examples. It's going to take us a couple of minutes, then we're going to take a nice 15-minute break, okay? So, suppose you're an avid hiker. You really love hiking. Why? Because when you see a mountain, you just hike on that mountain. You hike on that mountain, and you hike on that mountain until you're on the very top. And that's when you're happy. You're a happy hiker. Okay? How do you know that you reached the top?
Nowhere to go.
Elaborate. I mean, it's one way to put it. You say nowhere to go, but down, right? How do you know that there's nowhere to go but down? If you make step in any direction, you would go down, right? In other words, once you're on top, it's basically the only place where you neither go up nor go down. you're basically on that one spot on the mountain where the mountain is what? Flat, right? Everywhere else, the mountain has a slope, right? At this one spot, the mountain is basically flat. Okay? All right. So what? Well, let's take a different example. Let's say you're Frodo Baggins. You just had your finger bitten off by the spooky dude, right? And you're climbing down the mountain. Okay, you're returning back. And the mountain is vicious. There's lava everywhere, right? And you know you're in great danger. So you see a rock. And the rock looks something like this. So you find a refuge on that rock. And you're waiting, what happened there? I mean, it's been a while. Do the birds come and save you or something? Okay, so you know you have to wait a little bit on that rock and survive. The problem is there's lava flowing below the rock. What's going to happen if you're sitting here? If you're sitting there, lava is flowing just a short distance below your behind. So the rock is so hot, it's going to scorch your tail, right? In other words, you are trying to find a place on that rock that is the coolest. And it's the coolest where the distance, the thickness of the rock is the biggest. So the heat from the lava reaches that surface the least. That make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Where would you sit
The
if
highest
you could
thing.
choose?
You
The highest?
The highest thing.
In other words, here?
No, you make
No.
a slope parallel.
Oh, okay. Now, in other words, this would be the highest in terms of highest in
Yes.
that, right? But you would be only this far from lava.
You get
And we
it.
know that there are spots on that
So-
rock where you are even further away, right?
Yeah.
In terms of vertical distance, further away from the lava. So yes, how do you find that? You
Make a line parallel.
make a line parallel, the tangent
Yeah.
parallel to the underlying surface, right? Something like this.
Yeah.
And it gives us the point at which
Yeah.
what is true.
That's good.
The height.
At which the vertical distance is the greatest. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we now learn a thing or two from Frodo Baggins and transplant it to our profit maximization problem? So how do you find the quantity this firm should produce in order to maximize the profit?
Slope parallel to total revenue.
Okay, so we need a tangent parallel to total revenue, touching which curve?
And the
Total cost. Exactly. Okay, I'm doing my best, guys. Let's say this is the point, right? So the firm should produce this particular quantity in order to generate this much profit. Correct? Let's call that quantity Q star, profit maximizing quantity. Okay? It's the quantity at which the firm maximizes profit. Now, is that quantity in the middle between Q1 and Q2? Not necessarily. It is between Q1 and Q2, but not necessarily in the middle. In other words, that quantity that maximizes the profit is the quantity at which slope of total revenue is equal to the slope of total cost at that particular point. That makes sense? Okay guys, I think it's a good place to stop and take a 15-minute break. What do you say? Thank you.